Chemistry is the 15th program in Body Systems. Chemistry is a nugget of information that is going to allow you to expand your knowledge about what essential basic blood work looks like, but coming from the body system scan. So in this program, we're going to be looking at the chemistry as it relates to a normal foundational blood work, CBC, CMP, and the cofactors that go along with that, like cholesterol, thyroid, vitamin D, and a couple of other things. So as we get into what is actually a CBC? Well, a CBC is a foundational blood test that evaluates three main types of blood. There's red blood cells, there's white blood cells, and there are platelets. So the CBC is really important because it's a screening for different types of blood disorders. It helps detect different infections. It assesses the overall function of nutrition, and of course, it also monitors existing health conditions. So a CBC is a basic part of the blood panel that a lot of doctors will do just to see what your immune system may be doing. Along with the CBC is what we call a CMP. It's a comprehensive metabolic panel. Different from the CBC because it is actually measuring chemicals in your blood. And these chemicals are very important because they provide a ton of information about what your kidney functions are doing, what your liver functions are doing, your electrolytes, the fluid balance that's happening in your body, blood sugar levels, and protein levels. But here comes the problem. When we are looking at getting a typical blood work from the doctor, there's things that can come into play with that. Number one is it can be limited access. It's not typically a very accessible CBC blood test because it's hard to get into the doctors. There's a long wait time. Sometimes insurance doesn't cover it. Maybe there's phlebotomy challenges, which means that maybe the phlebotomist can't get your blood out, or you have veins that are flat. It's just challenging. Sometimes there's fasting requirements. There's transportation issues that can happen. One of the biggest things, though, is the fear of needles. That is a big phobia for a lot of people. And so being able to see what is going on in your body on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis is so powerful. Limited lab hours, and of course, the biggest one is the interpretation of your results. Because 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get your results back and everything will look normal, yet you don't feel normal. So those become problems when we're trying to have accessible blood work done as compared to doing the chemistry panel that is now available to us through the AO scan. You will find the chemistry scan under Body Systems on the 15th place down. You'll see it at the very, very bottom, chemistry. You can actually deselect all of the other ones if you wish and only select chemistry, and then you'll push the scan and optimize at the very top of your scanner. Once you have these results, you're gonna start seeing different areas of the CBC and the chemistry be flagged. Anything that has an up arrow, I want you to think of that as being an elevated level. Anything with a down arrow, think of that as being a lower than optimal level. Kind of if you look at it from a standpoint of 1s and 2s, maybe on the higher side, and 8s and 9s on the lower aspect. Now, I also want you to know that before we jump in, yes, the chemistry panel is also in the vitals scan. However, it's different. How it is different is because when you do a vital scan, the vital scan is looking at your entire body. It's looking at your meridians, your chakras, your foods. It goes into digestion, parasites, bacteria, all the things. So all of these markers that are there are being looked at as a whole. When we're looking at it through chemistry, we're only looking at the white blood cells, the red blood cells, the CBC, the chemistry panel as its own entity. So that's very important to know. Now, as we get into the CBC, the red blood cells are they transport oxygen. They transport it from your lungs to the rest of your body, and then they return carbon dioxide to your lungs for exhalation. So this is critical at maintaining your oxygen levels in your tissues. In addition to red blood cells, right below that, you're going to see what's called hemoglobin and hematocrit. Hemoglobin and hematocrit, these are proteins that bind to oxygen and give your red blood cells their color. So the hematocrit is going to measure the percentage of red blood cells in your blood. What we're looking there is if you ever have gone into the doctor and your red blood cells are low, so maybe you're anemic, your iron levels are low, it's going to be shown to start through your hemoglobin and hematocrit because those levels will be down. Contrary to that, if they're up, it just means that your blood is clumping together and that the oxygen is unable to transport properly through your body. Then there are MCV, MCH, and MCHC. Now, these all measure the size, the amount, and the concentration of the hemoglobin in your red blood cells. Then we get down to the white blood cells. And the truth is, the white blood cells, in my opinion, and their components are probably the biggest gold nugget of this entire thing. So white blood cells are critical for measuring your immune system. They help the body fight infections by attacking different bacteria and virus and other foreign invaders, such as like parasites. There are 5 types of white blood cells that we're going to look at, and this is where it gets fun. There's neutrophils, there's lymphocytes, there's monocytes, there's eosinophils, and there are basophils. All of them do specific functions within your immune system. But what happens is when you look at a white blood cell and you aren't actually looking deeper into these 5 different types of white blood cells, you kind of miss what may be going on in your immune system. So these ranges can indicate infections, they can indicate inflammation, and or other medical conditions that people may have. Now, before we get into there, we can't forget about the platelets. So your platelets, these are small blood cells that help with a clotting factor. So if you were to scrape yourself or cut yourself, we all want our blood to be able to clot fast enough that we don't lose too much blood. When our platelets are low, it means that we don't have the clotting factor that we need, and so blood vessels can become injured, and that becomes a medical problem. On the contrary, if you have too many platelets, then you can get like blood clots. So you've heard of people get DVTs. Oftentimes this happens after surgery, which is why they tell people, before surgeries, they tell people to stop taking anything that's going to thin your blood because they don't want you to have too much blood loss during a surgery. But contrary to that, they want you to have some blood thinners on board after surgery because they don't want you to get the blood clots. So it's the platelets that control all of those. Now let's get into the neutrophils. The neutrophils are the most abundant type of white blood cells. They are your body's first responders to any microbial infection, and they engulf and digest different pathogens. So if your neutrophil is on the higher side, there is a very good probability that you've got a bacterial infection somewhere in your body. It doesn't necessarily tell us where it is, how it got there, when it'll go away, and what degree it is. But I want you to think bacteria. Now, if you're looking at blood work, contrary to doing a scan, you're gonna find a percentage. And we like to see those neutrophils around 60%. Then we get into lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are the type of white blood cells that play a critical role in your immune response that make up about 30% of your total white blood cells. So neutrophils were 60. Now we're looking at lymphocytes as 30. Lymphocytes' main job is all about viral loads. So there are 3 types of lymphocytes. There are B cells, there are T cells, and there are natural killer cells. And what these do is they produce antibodies, they attack infected cells, and they also help destroy different cancer cells and virus-infected cells. So lymphocytes are also very important, but different than the neutrophils. So on lymphocytes, again, I want you to think about viral loads mainly. They also can be attached to some autoimmune diseases and sometimes some cancers. Now, monocytes, the third player in this game. Monocytes are a type of white blood that is an innate part of your immune system that cleans up dead cells and fights chronic infections. So viral infections such as you've maybe heard of mono or even Epstein-Barr virus. Those are 2 of the main viral loads that we look at when we're looking at monocytes. And now there are other viral loads out in the world that can be utilized by looking for monocytes there. These are produced in your bone marrow and they circulate in your bloodstream. So abnormal monocyte levels can also indicate some infections, inflammatory disease, and some other blood type disorders, but we really are focusing more on viral loads here. Then we get to the eosinophils. Eosinophils make up about 1 to 4% of your total white blood count. And they are a type of white blood cell that are involved in your body's response as it comes to parasites and food allergens. So that 1 to 4% are going to be fighting or combating parasites or food allergens that are involved in whether it's dietary or even environmental toxins that are coming in. So eosinophils release enzymes and toxic proteins that fight parasites, and they also help to try to modulate any kind of allergy or inflammation that are going on. High eosinophils can indicate the responses against infection as well. So whether it's high or whether it's low, I want you to think more of parasite or infections that way. Then there are basophils, and these are the least common type of white blood cell that are part of your immune system. But they also create this histamine response. So I think of them more as an allergic response to food or environmental toxins, but you can't disregard that they are also there to defend against parasites. And that's typically at a 1% or lower. So let's talk about that, because neutrophils were 60%, lymphocytes were 30%, and then you go down to monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils, which makes up a total of 100%. So you're always going to show 100% when you're looking at those ranges. Now, let's be mindful about blood. So blood, when you take blood out, you have to remember that blood is circulating through your body at very fast rates. So when you get your blood drawn, you are just getting a snippet of information at a time. If you go back 5 hours later and take your blood work again, there is a great possibility that these numbers will be different. That is what happens with blood. The same thing will happen when you start to scan. Your body is in a constant state of homeostasis. It's in a constant state of flux. It's at a constant state of trying to balance whatever it can. It's fighting stuff all day long. That is what your immune system is designed to do. So if you're scanning 1 second and rescanning, 10, 15 minutes later, you're gonna get different results. So just be aware of that. Now let's get into the CMP. So your CMP is this comprehensive blood test that is measuring a various of substances that are related to overall organs. We talked about kidney function, liver functions, electrolytes, proteins, calcium, glucose, and thyroid is also in there. So when we're looking at your liver functions, that's going to be things like your ALT, your AST, your alkaline phosphatase, your bilirubin, and your GGT. When we're looking at your ALT and AST, these are the most common that are sought after when we're looking at a blood test. If they're elevated, it is a clue that your liver is under stress. Whether it's congestion, whether it's damage, or whether it is your body's defense system against something else going on. Your ALT is the one that's most looked at, and that's going to indicate more of a liver inflammation and damage to your actual liver. Where AST is going to be an indication of also liver inflammation, but also some muscular inflammation and or muscular damage. That is because AST is also found in your muscles, in your brain, and other areas of your body. Then we get down to the one that I like a lot, which is alkaline phosphatase. Most people don't look at alkaline phosphatase. High levels can indicate liver or bone skeletal disorders because ALP, alkaline phosphatase, is not only made in your liver, it's also made in your bones. So when you see this coming up, it's not always liver, it can be something else. But I want you to think about, I want you to first go to liver because that's the area that all of the blood is being produced in. When alkaline phosphatase is low, I want you to think about going to look at potentially some metabolic disruption and or some parasites. Then we get down to the bilirubin and GGT. Now, both of them are a little different, but elevated levels of bilirubin can signify liver dysfunction and or bile duct blockages. Now, bile duct blockages doesn't necessarily mean anything about a gallbladder. It can because the gallbladder is what stores bile. But there are ducts that go back from your liver to your gallbladder that basically are distributed. And if there is a blockage going on there, the bilirubin can elevate. If the bilirubin is very low, it can also be a bile duct blockage there too. The GGT is the same. Elevated levels can also signify the bile duct congestion happening. Then we get into the kidney function tests. So we've all heard of creatine. Creatinine, some people call it creatine, some people call it creatinine. It comes out however it comes out. But elevated levels are going to indicate impaired kidney function. Now, impaired kidney function can be, is it the secondary organ that is trying to detoxify the body when your liver can't? Or is it by chance dehydration that's happening? The blood urea, BUN, anytime we see this elevated, I often think about either kidney imbalances, kidney problems, or dehydration. Do you have enough sodium? Do you have enough potassium? Have you had enough water in your day to support the function of your kidneys? Because your kidneys are that elimination system that have to flush out everything that is coming through your urinary system. Then there is a ratio between the BUN and the creatinine. These are also going to be an indication of kidney dysfunction. If this ratio is off, you definitely want to go back and look to see what other ratios are off. This one is oftentimes an indication of dehydration as well. Then we get into the electrolytes. That's things like you've heard of sodium, potassium, chloride, carbon dioxide. Now, sodium, potassium, these are huge. Sodium, potassium are truly what give the body the cellular energy that it needs to do all the jobs. I think about it as vitality. I think about it as recovery. I think about it as, does your body have enough energy to even help with digestion? Your sodium itself is going to regulate the fluid balance in your body. And of course, blood pressure. So if you've got high blood pressure or low blood pressure, or you've got some edema happening, or you've got fluid piling up in a knee or an elbow, sure, there might be some inflammation there, but there's also this dysregulation of fluid that can't move. It can also be an indication of some cardiovascular imbalance as well. Potassium is its counterpart. So potassium and sodium are really, they work synergistically together. One is essential for the fluid balance, and potassium is essential for your heart and muscle function. So think about muscles, think about the leg cramps in the middle of the night when you're trying to sleep. You go to get up and you just get this muscle cramp. That's oftentimes when your sodium or your potassium level gets too low in comparison to your sodium level. It also disrupts your nervous system, and it also, when you have enough potassium in your body, is going to help with protein and carbohydrate metabolism. When you have protein and carbohydrate metabolism, your body is able to break excess waste down and get it out of your body, so that does help with metabolism. Chloride is going to help with the fluid balance in your body and the pH levels. So if chloride is coming up, another indication that you're dehydrated. Now we see dehydration all of the time. People think they're drinking tons of water, and they might be, but are you actually getting it into your cells? Because water follows sodium. Water follows electrolytes. And then water also has to be in a small nanoparticle size to be able to get into your cells. Then we have the carbon dioxide, and this indicates the acid base balance. So this is where we talked about earlier, where when you're breathing in oxygen, carbon dioxide is going to be what's being released. And this is the waste product that's carried out by your lungs, but it is in that electrolyte section. Other tests include things like glucose and calcium. Now, glucose is a very good indicator of either pre-diabetes or sometimes diabetes. It depends. Most of the time you're going to want to look for a fasting glucose level. So if this comes up, it's just an indication that, are you breaking down carbohydrates? Are you craving sweets? And then we want to look at, the glucose is a quick snapshot in time. We're going to want to look at what your hemoglobin A1C is doing, because that is a very good indicator over a 2 to 3 month period of what's really going on as far as glucose and insulin are concerned. Then we have your calcium. Now, calcium we know is so important for bone health. And we need other things like boron, vitamin D, magnesium that all help with that bone health. But calcium is also there for muscle function and, of course, nerve signaling. As the body becomes more stressed, we see that calcium levels tend to go up, and they start to store in the soft tissues, which can create a lot of joint pain for people. Now, blood work is an indication of what type of calcium is moving through your blood very quickly. The AO scan is going to provide an indication or patterns of if you start to see calcium coming up high a lot. If you do, there's a good possibility that you've got some calcification happening in your body, again, which can create a lot of inflammation and pain. Then there are other cofactors that we look at when we're looking at a chemistry panel. We talked a little bit about the hemoglobin A1C, which is that glucose level looking over a 2 to 3 month period. Then we're looking at things like uric acid. Now, uric acid is an indicator of how much uric acid or gallstones, I think about gallstones in the body, or even kidney stones. So uric acid can create stones in your body. So we want to see if that level is high. Is it related to the calcium? Is it related to just a genetic predisposition for creating too much uric acid in your body? Phosphorus, I think about as protein. I actually think about it as amino acids. Are you getting enough protein in your diet? And is your body even able to break down that protein to help with any kind of amino acids recovery? And phosphorus is where I tend to look at that one. Then there's cholesterol, there's triglycerides, the HDL, the LDL. These are all indications of your cardiovascular disease, and I think about, or cardiovascular health, should I say, as well as looking at what fatty acids and oils are happening in your body. Cholesterol itself needs to be around 200. Now, you're going to have some doctors say that, if it's much higher than that or much lower than that, they want to put you on a statin. The truth is our body needs cholesterol specifically for our brain health and the production of hormones. So if your cholesterol gets too low, or if you're on a statin and you start to see patterns, it might be worth checking into to see what your cholesterol is doing. If it's below 180, it might be worth talking to your physician about with a statin. It's also an indicator that anytime your cholesterol is out of balance, sometimes the body needs a little bit of CoQ10, which is a coenzyme for your heart. Triglycerides are going to be showing you what your cholesterol level is doing as it relates to glucose and blood sugars. So oftentimes triglycerides can be high or low. HDL is your good cholesterol, while LDL is your not so good cholesterol. Sometimes this is indicative of what people are actually eating. Are you going through drive-thrus and getting hamburgers and French fries and eating a bunch of junk food? Or are you eating a really well-balanced diet? It can be genetic, it can be a lot of different things, but you just want to watch these patterns. Then we have things like iron, TIBC, and ferritin. These are all looking to see if your body has a predisposition for any anemia or imbalances with your blood. So going back to the hemoglobin and hematocrit, or if a female is having menstrual cycles that are very heavy, this can start to show where those iron levels will drop. Or maybe there's a small bleed in the stomach or somewhere else in the body that is not known. If you start to see these numbers dropping, you just know that the body is starting to lose or doesn't have enough blood to transport the oxygen and other vital nutrients through. The HSCRP is a high sensitivity CRP. This is a inflammation marker. So you'll be looking for inflammation. If it keeps coming up high or low, it's an indication of inflammation. TSH is thyroid. That's the hormone that is produced from the pituitary gland to the thyroid gland. It's the communication pathway between those two. There are other thyroid markers that are not on the chemistry panel right now. They may be in the future. And then we have vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is typically synthesized from the sun. It can be taken orally with some fat-soluble vitamins to help with the absorption of it. So if your vitamin D level keeps coming back low, one of the things, number one, we have the vitamin D K2 supplement that is phenomenal. The second piece is, are you getting enough sunshine first thing in the morning to help create that circadian rhythm? So there are other things to do besides just supplements. So sometimes just doing some habits or lifestyle changes can increase or decrease some of these levels.